We continue now at the top of Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis in Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 12b. On the previous Amud, the Gemara said that a chacham, people who are chacham and people who are wise, they have some nevuah. And Rav now is in the middle of proving that, because sometimes a chacham will say something, and it turns out Mishmei de Rabbi Akiva bar Yosef kevase. It turns out that the same thing was said in the name of Rabbi Akiva. And Rashi explains Mishmei de Rabbi Akiva kevase. Now, if he said the same thing as Rabbi Akiva, v'lekol lememar b'nei chad mazlaninu. Now, you can't say like the argument we made in the previous Amud that they're all from the same mazel, they're all from the same constellation. Maybe he said the same thing as Rabbi Akiva because he was born under the same mazel as Rabbi Akiva. You can't say that. Shari Rabbi Akiva chacham mimenu harbe, because Rabbi Akiva is much wiser than this particular chacham. So it must be that it was said with some kind of nevuah. You see that the chachamim, they have some kind of nevuah. But the Gemara continues. Amar Rav Ashi says, "Umay koshi, but what's so difficult? Dilma laham milsa bar mazlihu. Maybe for this particular issue, for this particular halacha, he is under the same constellation. He has his mazel." Elamar Rav Ashi, rather Rav Ashi says, "Teda, you should know it's true that the chachamim have some nevuah. Diamar gavra rava milsa, because a great person will say something. Umisamra halacha l'Moshe misinai kavasin. Will turn out that the same thing was a halacha l'Moshe misinai." But the Gemara still says v'dilma kisuma ba'aruba. But maybe that's the same thing as a blind person finding a skylight. Maybe it's essentially total luck that he said the same thing. But the Gemara says you can't say that. V'lav tam yoiv. Didn't the person give some kind of reason? It shows that he had some understanding of what he was saying, and he turned out to say the same thing as was a halacha l'Moshe misinai. You see that there was some element of nevuah. And Rashi says, "V'lav taima kamar b'milsa." Didn't he give a reason? V'kevan damar taima. And so since he did say a reason, ein zeh kesuma. It's not like a blind person shemechavin leirid ba'aruba b'mikra b'alma who happens to be able to go down a skylight. Elasvaras halevi haba lo b'nevuah. It must be some kind of logic of the heart that comes to the person through prophecy. V'zacha lahaskim lahalacha l'Moshe misinai. And he merited to say something in agreement with the halacha l'Moshe misinai. And the Gemara continues. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, "Miyom shecharav Beis Hamikdash." From the day the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, nitla nevuah min haneviim. Prophecy was taken from the prophets. V'nitna l'shotim u'letinokos, and it was given to shotim, to imbeciles, and to tinokos, to children. And the Gemara says, "L'shotim mahi," to imbeciles. What is the story about that? Ki had Mar bar Rav Ashi d'havekoi biristaka de Mechuza. It was the story of Mar bar Rav Ashi. He was standing in the streets of Mechuza. Shamei lahu shota de ka'amar. He heard a certain shota who was saying as follows: Reish mesifta de molech b'masa mechasya tavyume chasim. The head of the yeshiva in Masa Mechasya, he signs his name Tavyume. Amar man chasim Tavyume b'Rabbanan. So he said to himself, meaning Mar bar Rav Ashi said to himself, who signs Tavyume among the Rabbanan? I know that's me. Shma mino l'didi kaimali shaiti. You see that to me now is the time for me to become the head of the yeshiva. Come asa. So he went and he came. In other words, he went to Masa Mechasya. Adas, and as he was coming, imnu Rabbanan la'osve l'Ravacha midifti bereisha. The Rabbanan, they had taken account and they wanted to appoint Ravacha from Difti to be the head. Kavan deshami dasa, but once they heard that he came, meaning once they heard that Mar bar Rav Ashi had arrived, so they wanted to consult him. Shadar zuka de Rabbanan lagabe lemluche be. They sent a pair of the Rabbanan over to him to consult with him. Ikve, so he held them back. Hadar shadar zuka de Rabbanan achrina. They sent another pair of the Rabbanan. Ikve gabe, again he held them back by him. Ademalu be asar, until he had 10 people there. Kavan demalu be asar, once he had 10 people, pasachu v'tana v'darash. He began to say his drasha. Lefisha ein poschen bekala pachos me asar, because you don't do the drasha of the kala. These are the drashas that were said in advance of the Yamim Tovim. You don't do that with less than 10 people, and he was appointed the head. Kari Ravacha nafshi. So when Ravacha heard the story, he called about himself the following statements: Kol hamarian lo, anyone who it's bad for him, lo b'mehera metivan lo, it's not going to be good for him quickly. V'chol hametivan lo, and anyone who is good for him, lo b'mehera marian lo, it's not going to be bad for him quickly. Meaning he understood that Mar bar Rav Ashi would be able to retain his position. And the Gemara continues: Tinokas mahi. What's the story with the young child in terms of prophecy? Ki had the Basra of Chisda have a yasva bekanfe deavu. It was like the story of the daughter of Rav Chisda. She was sitting on the lap of her father. Have a yasvi kamei Rav of Rami bar Chama, and Rav and Rami bar Chama, they were sitting before Rav Chisda. They were the students of Rav Chisda. Amar lo, he said to her, man minayu boys, which one of these do you want? Which one would you like to marry? Amar le, she said to him, tarvayu. She says, I'd like to marry both of them. Amar Rava said, va'ano Basra, I should be the later one. And that's exactly what happened. She married Rami bar Chama, he died, and then she married Rava. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Avdimi de min Chaifa. Rav Avdimi from Chaifa says, Kodem sheyochal adam v'yishta, before a person eats and drinks, yesh lo shtei levavos, it's as if he has two hearts. It means to say that he's unsettled. La'achar she'ochal v'shosa, but after he eats and drinks, ein lo ela leivecha, then he only has one heart, then he is more settled. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, ish novav yilovev, we understand that to mean a person that's hollow, so yilovev is like he has two hearts. Uchsiv, it's written nevuv luchos, it says nevuv luchos, we're trying to understand the translation of nevuv, umitargamin cholil luchin, we translate that as hollow with planks, and so therefore you see that nevuv means hollow, and the point is, if he is hollow, if he's hungry, then it's as if he has two hearts, he becomes unsettled. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Huna Bereid Rav Yoshua, Rav Huna the son of Rav Yoshua says, Haragil biyayin, if somebody's accustomed to having wine, afilu libo atum kivesul, even if his heart is closed like a virgin, yayin mifakcho, but the wine opens up his heart. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, v'tirosh yinovev besulos, it says that the wine opens up, so to speak, hollows out, opens up the besulos, and that's the same idea. His mind is opened up through the wine. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, Amar Rav Huna Bereid Rav Yoshua, Rav Huna the son of Rav Yoshua says, Pshita chelek bechor v'chelek pashut, it's obvious, let's say a bechor, a firstborn, so he has the double portion, he has the regular portion, and then his additional portion as a bechor, so it's obvious that Yahavinon le'achad mitzvah, that we're going to give him the two portions along one boundary, that the property should all be contiguous. But Yavam mai, but what about when we're talking about a Yavam in the situation of Yibam, so the Yavam, the brother-in-law, he gets the portion of the brother that was deceased, so he also sort of gets a double portion like a bechor. Does he also get contiguous property? Amar Abaya says, it's the same thing over there. My time, what's the reason? Bechor, Kiri Rachmana, because the Torah is referring to him as a Bechor, and so he gets to have the property adjacent to one another, just like a Bechor. Rava Amar Rava says, Amar Kra, that the pasuk says, V'haya ha-Bechor, it says it will be the Bechor, Havayaso ke-Bechor, meaning he's like a Bechor, however, Ve'ein chalukaso ke-Bechor, but the division of the property is not like a Bechor, he doesn't necessarily get the properties one next to the other. And Rashi explains, Pshita chelek Bechor v'chelek pashut, it's obvious when you have the portion of the Bechor and the portion as a regular brother, Shnei chalokin sha Bechor notel, meaning the two portions that the Bechor takes, Echad mishum Bechor, one because he's a firstborn, V'echad mishum Pshita, and the general one that he gets is a brother. Yavinan le'achad mitzvah zu etzel zu, he obviously gets it on the same boundary, one next to the other. Sharei shnei and chelko hein, they're both his portion. V'arei hein k'chelek echad, it's all like one portion. But Yavam mai, what's the halacha by a Yavam, by the brother-in-law? Hamiyavim es eshes achiv, meaning to say, again, he marries the wife of his deceased brother to come tacht of lenachla, he gets his inheritance, meaning he gets the inheritance of the deceased brother. V'notel shnei chalakim, he gets two portions. Mai, what's the halacha there? Mimatzu amri lehol mikoach achrina kaasi lo yahavilu nehile achad mitzvah. Are they able to say, since you're really coming from someone else, it's not all your portion, so you don't necessarily get on the same boundary, zu etzel zu, one next to the other, ilav malisa gabon bidmei, unless you give us a little extra money, then we'll give you that. And then the Gemara quoted the pasuk habechor asher teiled, it talks about bechor when it refers to the yavam, biyavam kamishtoi. The pasuk is talking about a yavam, a brother-in-law. The mitzvah begadol liyavim. The mitzvah happens to be that the oldest one should do the yibam. That's why it says bechor. Asher teiled. What does it mean? Asher teiled prat la'ailanis. That's to exclude an ailanis. She's not part of this halach of yibam. V'hachi midrash kran. This is how you darshan in the pasuk. Yavama yavo aleh v'haya habechor. Eza min hayavamin, which one of the brother-in-laws does the yibam? Eza min hayavamin yavo aleh, which one does the yibam? Habechor asher teiled, it's the oldest one. Ukegon shayavama bas v'lodosi, but it has to be that the yavama, that sister-in-law, that she is able to have children, prat la'ailanis, that excludes if she's an ailanis, and she's not able to have children. And the Gemara continues, Hahu dezavan ara mitzvah debei neshay, there was a person who bought land, and it was along the boundary of his father's property. And then the father died and left over property. So Kika Palgo, so when they were dividing the property, Amar Le, so one brother said to the other, Pligo Li Mitzrah, I want to divide it in a way that it's on my boundary, meaning that what I inherit should be adjacent to my current property. Amar Rabba says, could go and say an example like this case, Kofan al Midastom, we would force against the Midastom, meaning there's nothing that this other brother loses by giving his brother land that's adjacent to his current property, and therefore we do in fact say that he's able to take land that is specifically adjacent to his own property. Ma'askiv la Rav Rav Yosef asks on this, Amri le achi ma'alinon le ilave kinichse deve bar Mirion. Why can't the brother say that this land to me is like it's like superior quality, like the property of Bei bar Mirion, meaning to say, no, I want this particular piece of land because it is of higher quality in my view. And the Gemara says, V'hilchasa Rav Yosef, the halacha is like Rav Yosef. The other brother could say that, he could say that land that's adjacent to your property is higher quality, and therefore I want that land in particular. And the Gemara continues, Trei arasa atrei nigri. Let's say you have two pieces of property, and they're along two irrigation channels. Amar Rabba says, Kagon Zeh, an example like this case, Kofan al midas dom. In this case as well, we would force against the midas dom, meaning to say, they're both essentially the same piece of land. One brother can say, I specifically want the piece of land that is near my property. Ma'askif lo Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef asks on this, Zimnin dahai midvil, v'hai lo midvil. Maybe this one, and sometimes this one might be able to irrigate properly, the other channel might not. And so the brother can say, who says we should give you that property? I feel that that property is better positioned in terms of irrigation. V'hilchasa Rav Yosef, and the Gemara says the halacha is like Rav Yosef. The brother is allowed to make that claim. Tarti achad nigra. Now let's say they're both along one irrigation channel. So here they're really both identical. You can't say one is better than the other. Amar Rav Yosef says, Kagon zeh kofan al midas dom. In this case, we would force against midas dom, and the brother is able to take the property that's adjacent to his own. Ma'askif lo Abaye asked on this, Matzi Yamar, can't he say, Bo'ina da apish arisa? On the contrary, I would rather your property be divided up, because then you need more sharecroppers, and that creates more security. So I specifically don't want you to have a contiguous property. And in this case, the Gemara says, V'hilchasa Rav Yosef. The halacha really is like Rav Yosef. You can't make a claim specifically that you want your brother's property to be split up. Afushe lav milsi, to say that you want it to have more arise, to have more sharecroppers, that's not a good claim. And Rashi explains, the Zavan Ara Mitzra Debei Nashah, he bought property by the boundary of his father, Kana Karka Eitzel Sad Aviv, again he bought a land by the field of his father, Ki Motel Miflag Im Achid Benichsei Aviv, when he wanted to divide the property of his father with his brother, Al Midas Sodom. So again we say you force against Midas Dom, Zenenev Zelo Chaser, because this person gains, the other one doesn't lose. So of course you're going to let him have the adjacent property. And then Amru Achi Ma'alinon Lei Lavi, but then if the brother says, I consider this better quality, Lanu Hi Meshubachas Ka'osav Shal Bar Mirion, for us this property is considered good, like the property of Bar Mirion, Shayu Ma'ulos, they had very high quality property. Umistabra Hadar of Yosef Besad Baal Sheyacholin Lomar Pamim Shazum Esparechas Mishar Hasados. He says it makes sense to say that this argument that Rav Yosef is making, when he says we can say this is better quality, it's talking about a Sada Baal, and a Sada Baal, you're talking about a field where one might be more blessed than the other one. It's possible he can make such a claim, and a Sada Baal is specifically a non-irrigated field. And then the Gemara said, Trei Arata, Trei Nagri, let's say you have two pieces of land, two pieces of property along two different irrigation channels. In Beis HaShalchani, again, this is if it's an irrigated field, V'yesh l'shnei achin lachlok shtei sados l'chol achas, yesh lo ye'or lahashkos mimenu, they're going to divide up two fields, each one has its own irrigation channel. V'zeh kana sada eitz lo'echon mehen, and this person happens to own property, meaning one of the brothers has a field right next to one of them. V'rotz hashit enachiv zu asmuch shelo, he wants the one close to his property, and the other brother will take the other. So kagon zu kofin here, you could certainly force against the midas dom. To halakarka hashniya gam hi yesh lo ye'or lahashkos mimenu, because both properties have an irrigation channel. So why should he be able to say, I specifically want to split up these fields? Why split them up? You take one, I'll take the other. And the answer is, Hai midvil v'hai lo midvil. He can answer back, no, I'm afraid that the channel might dry up. Derech hayorim liyavish kishanor sham nemshachim mimenu mismayit lipamim. Sometimes the amount of water goes down. Shazeh yavish v'zeinu yavish. One dries out, one doesn't. V'yomer lo. So therefore the brother can say, Tol chelkecha b'shteihem. I want to split up these two fields. We should each get half of each field, so we'll each have access to both channels. Delav midas domi. That's not midas dom. Otein lanu iloi bidmei. Or you have to pay me a little more. So he could claim, no, I don't want you specifically to take the field that's closer to your field, because then I only have one irrigation channel and there is no backup. And tarti arasa yeshlam lachlok al chad nagra. Finally, the Gemara had two pieces of land on one irrigation channel. V'echon man kana karkoetz lachas, and again, one of them has a field that's adjacent to one of the fields. So he said, kofan al midas dom, we can force against the midas dom. The kevan da chad nagra ninu shtei and shavos, here they're all in the same channel anyway, so they're exactly equal. And nicholila afushe arise, so then he tries to claim that I want you to have more sharecroppers. Tovli sheyehelach shtei sados achas mikan v'achas mikan. It's good for me that you have two fields, one here, one there. V'achas li bems, and I'll be in the middle. Kadei shatir balach aris, and that way you'll have a lot of sharecroppers. Utei sados shalim mishtameres yafe, and that way my field field will be very secure. But the Gemara said that kind of argument we do not accept, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph.